I will call the board to order for Tuesday, September 13th, 2022. Due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, in accordance with Chapter 22 of the Acts of 2022, suspending certain provision of the open meeting law, public bodies otherwise governed by the open meeting law are temporarily relieved from the requirement that meetings be held in public places, open and physically accessible to the public, so long as measures are taken to ensure public access to the body's deliberations through adequate alternative means. This meeting will be live on Zoom. The public may participate remotely by joining Zoom meeting ID number 854-0032-4335 or by calling 929-205-6099. For additional information about remote participation, please contact Carly Antonellis, Assistant Town Manager at ATM at Ayer.MA.US or 978-772-8220 extension 100 prior to the meeting. All right, thanks everyone for joining us today. We have the call to order on the agenda complete. Next item is the review and approval of the meeting minutes from August 23rd, 2022. Were there any changes to the presented minutes?
Good to me.
No, they look fine to me. Okay, do I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Motion. Oh, seconded.
Excellent, thank you. Roll call the vote. Ms. Antonellis,
Aye.
Ms. Tierney,
Aye.
Mr. Aponte, and Mr. Pompriand,
Aye.
and the chair says aye. The minutes are approved. Number 3 on our agenda for today is town finances and budget status update.
Mr. Chair, I'll just go first briefly, and then if Fred or Barbara have anything to add on the update. In terms of the budget status, last time we discussed the budget calendar. If folks could take a look at that again, and if there's any questions or suggestions or so forth, let Carly and I know. The plan is for the September 20th meeting of the select board is to present that draft to the select board to get their thoughts or any input. And then as we traditionally do, we're looking to get that schedule ultimately approved by the select board at their meeting on October 4th. So we're just in the beginning phases of the next budget cycle. But through you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Aponte from his end has any updates, or Ms. Tierney?
The only update I have is that I should be submitting the balance sheet by the beginning of next week, maybe the middle of next week, so we can get free cash certified before the October town meeting. That's about it.
Yeah, so for me, the treasurer's cash reconciliation is out there. The statement of indebtedness, both Fred and I updated and looked at. And then the only other thing I have is August collections went well, and I am in the process of doing the next tax taking, and happy to report that since we did the intent to takes and the demands, we've brought in another almost $200,000. It's amazing how the advertisements do work. So we're in good shape. Okay. And I'll put that in my monthly report. I'll put some actual numbers in my monthly report if anybody's interested.
Excellent, thank you. Anything else on the town finances or budget? No? Okay, wonderful. Moving on to number 4 on the agenda, review and discussion of proposed updates and revisions to the financial policies. I will pre-apologize. I did not get the chance to take another look at the policies, though I had submitted some changes, I think, back late last year, early this year, on the current versions that we do have. So with that, I'll turn it over to whoever wants to take the lead.
Sure.
Robert?
So, Mr. Chairman and members of the BI board, I have a brief presentation related to the financial policies, and really item number 4 and 5 on the agenda sort of go together. At looking at the policies, I sort of put this as a very rough presentation, but thanks to Ms. Antonellis for shining it up some. I tried to encapsulate all of the major issues, if you will, so they're in one point that we could discuss And as in number 5, I know that Barbara had brought up previously the idea of a working group or so forth to sort of really iron these out. So Carly will also send this to everybody. It's more of just an outline, and through you, Mr. Chair, just take a few minutes I'll go through it quickly.
Yeah, please.
And then, and Carly, would you navigate for me, please?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So this is just an overview. And again, I may have missed something, or there may be additional points folks want to start. So next. So just an overview of the general updates, and many of you have submitted this. There's a lot of language changes and updates. For example, updating where it says Board of Selectmen to Select Board, or Town Administrator to Town Manager, updates in the general sense. I think we're in pretty good shape there. The second thing, which we'll talk about later, as Barbara mentioned, we have a specific investment policy that is subject to update and revision every year. It's currently in the policy, and it was suggested that it be removed with a reference to where it can be found and how it's subject to annual review from the financial advisors. So we'll come back to that later in the slide. And then one of the things I pose here and throughout this, I put questions for us to ponder is, are there any other format changes that we'd like to see in terms of font, layout, and so forth? So something to just think about. And that is not a criticism of the current document, is fine as far as I'm concerned, but if we're doing the update, now would be the time to look at that. Next. So one of the areas, and on each of the slides when she sent it, I referenced the page number. It's on in the policy, and this comes from, I should point out, all of your comments I've sort of incorporated into this. So on page 4, there's a section on the restrictions of the financial policies, and it currently reads, these policies will be binding once accepted by a majority vote of the Board of Selectmen. In the event that the policies cannot or will not be adhered to, they can only be bypassed with a majority override vote by both the Board of Selectmen and Finance Committee. And then I put down proposed. We need to rework that. And I've been looking at that in the sense that these are policies and so forth, but ultimately the issue that has come up from town council and so forth is the issue of the override and the binding piece. So I will come back to that. I think we need to clean that up. And I understand the intent. The intent is we want everybody to adhere to these policies. And if in the event that they can't be, is there a mechanism to address that, or a mechanism to address changing that?
Yeah, Robert, if I may, to give some context around that, when this was put in, it was Chairman Muldoon and myself who put that piece together. And to your point, the fear we had was we were going through to put together these financial policies, and once these were adopted, that we wanted them to have some semblance of teeth in our approach in operations as we put our budgets together. So this, at the time, was the best that we came up with, but even at the time, town council did tell us it was not 100%. So, but we put it in anyway, just to, I guess, ask for forgiveness later above everything else. So that's the context of where we were trying to go with the original version of this.
Agreed, and thank you. And I know, Scott, you and I have discussed it over the years, and it's a great first attempt. So again, we're going to move on to get through this quickly, but we can come back to anything. This is one area we want to use Scott's comment in the most recent review, is sort of clear up or refine. But the challenge is we do want to have, to use Scott's term, teeth in it as much as we can. Next. So then on page 5 of the document's third paragraph, there's a section about the audit in the management letter. And the third paragraph on page 5 addresses a committee to review the management letter, summarize the information, and share with department heads. The Finance Committee will review the recommendations and findings with the department heads and town officials in a public forum and implement changes if possible. And again, we're looking to sort of review and update. There's not a criticism of this, but since this current policy has been in place, we have not followed it exactly. I will say in full disclosure that I know in my time, the management letter has been reviewed and discussed at times, both at the select board and the FinCom, but this idea of a committee and so forth didn't quite happen. What the bottom is a proposed suggestion that the executive by board shall review the town's management letter and transmit a summary to the select board, finance committee, and town manager regarding the recommendations and findings. This summary shall be reviewed by the select board and finance committee in an open public meeting with recommendations to be made to the town manager and finance manager for implementation. So the major changes is giving the audit and management letter assignment really to the by board first to review it, come up with any summary that is related at this level, transmit that to the select board, the finance committee, and the town manager, and then the select board and finance committee in an open meeting review and discuss that. So that's just a proposal of sort of refining that. And again, we don't have to go this way. I'm just trying to put some suggestions.
May I? So I just want to say, I think that's good because the majority of us who would read the finance, the management letter are on the by board already. So, you know, being Fred, Carly, you, me, and Scott as a selectman. So I think that makes sense instead of having another committee.
Agreed with that 100%.
Yeah, but so to Barbara's point, that's the essence. It basically it takes away creating another subcommittee, puts it with the by board, requires the by board to summarize it, formally transmit it to both the select board and the finance committee, and also puts the guidance that those two public bodies would meet and review. Next. So the financial forecasting on page 6, and I will say when I first came to Ayer 12 years ago, and Scott's been at this in Ayer longer than I have, the tri-board at the time, there was a lot of discussion about a financial forecasting and financial model for the town of Ayer, which I think is definitely a good idea. It's a best practice, as all of you financial folks know. We have yet to get that over the years, and again, not a criticism, fully refined and in place. And I know we have a lot of new financial folks. So as I put on the bottom, though the financial forecasting is a best practice, and there's no issue with this recommendation or this section, the reality is that over the last 12 years, it has yet to be effectively done. And I know a lot of work went into that. So I think this is something more of not necessarily the policy to be thinking about, but I think we need to think about the forecasting and the model in the future. And under the pencil image, I put, what do we do about this section? Do we just keep it for now? Do we delete it, or do we revise it? And maybe that's for a larger discussion. If it's for a larger discussion, perhaps we just keep it for now until we develop a plan. Next. Employee compensation. So I think through the last revision of the policies, we developed, I think there was no process before the last round in the policies. And I think that the policy, the procedure in the policy is good. One of the points that Scott and some others brought up is, do we want to add a cap to that COLA recommendation? Now, over the last, in my 12 years here, and the cost of living recommendation has been 2%, with the exception of 2011 when there was no COLA, it was 0 because it was the pre-regionalization. Do we want some type of language or a concept of a cap? Because what I'm getting at is the metrics we use to make the recommendation are good. The issue is if we go by those metrics, what we're seeing, Social Security is looking at a 6% or a significant increase in the year ahead and so forth. These metrics may recommend something that is not sustainable. So there's two, I think, key points we need to flesh out here. One is, Do we add some kind of cap or parameter to the recommendation? If so, what? And then the first bullet, I got ahead of myself. In the current policy, it talks about an economic downturn will trigger a review of this policy. Do we want to further sort of quantify or qualify what that would be? So 2 points to think about there. And I just put to add to the policy, the town manager make an annual COLA recommendation to the select board and finance committee for their consideration. The recommendation is subject to select board approval to put before town meeting. The finance committee shall put forth its position on said recommendation at town meeting. So just clarifying the process a little bit. Next. So the enterprise section on page 10, these are the enterprise and other similar funds, and apologize for the formatting. Since the last revision of this, we put in place a rate review committee. And so what I'm suggesting we add for the enterprise funds is the rate review committee shall meet quarterly to review the rates for the water, sewer, and solid waste enterprise funds. The rate review committee shall make annual recommendations on the solid waste enterprise rates to the select board each October at an open public meeting. The rate review committee shall make annual recommendations on the water and sewer rates to the select board each March at an open public meeting. So basically adding what we're doing now. And then the second paragraph is the ambulance enterprise fund shall be reviewed biannually by the fire chief, finance manager, and town manager, with any recommendations being made in an open public meeting of the select board. Next. On the stabilization and capital stabilization, which is on page 10 and 11, I think we need to, and we've discussed this informally some, I think we need to review and discuss the current percentages in the policy as we've ramped up stabilization, capital stabilization. I think we need to look at those percentages. I know many of you flagged that in your comments in the review. We need to revise the current example to reflect more, so there's an example in there for the public as to how the percentages work, is just tweak that to update it. And I think we should add in there, I was surprised we didn't have that in there, is that the authorization to expend stabilization and capital stabilization funds requires a 2/3 majority vote of town meeting. Next. The OPEB on pages 11 and 12. I think since the last review, didn't make the last review, we should add the town's OPEB Board of Trustees, which consists of the finance manager, lists who's on it, and a representative from the select board shall meet quarterly to review the town's OPEB funds and make any recommendations related to OPEB to the select board and finance committee for consideration. And I pose, do we want to add a finance committee representative? So this is specific. There's 5 members with the town manager as an ex officio, and the 5 members is set by state, not on the local level. It's the finance manager, the treasurer, tax collector, the town clerk, benefits and payroll, and a representative from the select board. There's no formal finance committee representative. If we felt that should be the case, we need to perhaps maybe remove the town clerk position. I was thinking that because out of all of the 5 positions, sort of the least of the financial positions, and replace that with a FinCom rep. And that would also take a vote of the select board, but something to think about. Next. On the cannabis policy, I just wanted to put this here as a placeholder. Do we want a dedicated cannabis policy? And if so, what? And we can discuss in more detail. Next. Capital planning. This is on pages 12 through 15. I suggest we add the town manager and finance manager are voting members of the committee. The select board changed that several years ago to add those 2 as voting. I think we need to review the charge of the committee. Do we need to change the various capital thresholds So right now, we're defining capital as $10,000 or more for a one-time expenditure. Do we change that? That's just a question. Right now, it's 350,000 or more requires a capital or a debt exclusion. Does that need to be looked at? 40,000 and under, the practice has been to recommend funding from capital stabilization. That's been a sort of a practice over the last almost 7 years of the committee. Does that need, but it's not in the policy per se. The other thing I flagged that we need to review and maybe change is right now in the policy, it says the capital planning committee will prepare a multi-year report to be given at town meeting. We have not done that to date. Again, I think we need to look at that and address that. And then on the bottom, the current section 2.1 states an amount equal to 8% of the proposed operating budget shall go into a capital expense fund. Again, I think we need to look at that at the current balance and see, does that percentage or this piece of the policy need to be tweaked? Next. Again, continuing on capital planning, do we add language that further defines the 5-year capital plan? So our current policy, and what we have done is we have all departments prepare and maintain a 5-year capital plan. Do we want to further define that or add any required elements to that plan in the policy? Again, this is a question for consideration. The other one is, do we add language expanding the requirements of the capital planning committee to include to meet periodically to review the town's capital plan, long-term planning, and debt schedule? So I know that Selectman Hood, who's the current chair, has raised recently. In the past, the committee has largely met from December to February on the current capital recommendations. And I know that Scott has mentioned, and I do agree that we need to perhaps expand that the capital planning committee also meet throughout the year periodically to review the capital plan, the long-term planning, and the debt schedule. Again, something we should consider. And then on the second bullet, do we add language regarding vehicle acquisition? For example, the town does have a Green Communities energy efficiency fuel policy, but it's not spelled out in the current financial policies. And as those of you who have been involved in capital planning, as of late, there's a lot of vehicles and vehicle needs. And do we further define the vehicle acquisition piece within these policies? Next. The investment policy, which currently is spelled out in great detail in the financial document, is pages 15 through 24. And I think at both in her comments and at a previous meeting, the town treasurer tax collector had reported that per the town's financial advisors, the current investment policy and the financial policy should be removed because it changes. So what I'm proposed is we add language that says the town of Ayer has a detailed investment policy, which is under the care and custodianship of the town treasurer tax collector. The town's investment policy shall be reviewed annually by the town treasurer tax collector, finance manager, and town manager in consultation with the town's financial advisors, who shall publicly report annually to the select board and finance committee and any required updates or recommended changes to the policy. The town's investment policy can be found at, and then wherever we decide to put it. Next. On the water and sewer shutoff policy, the DPW has reviewed it and they made some minor changes to the shutoff policy. This is on page 24. I couldn't fit it on this slide correctly, those changes, so I'll send it after this meeting to everybody. And in discussing with Barbara, we want to connect with DPW regarding the issue of the shutoff policy in a little more detail, because one of the issues is the treasurer tax collector's office sort of by de facto is becoming the shutoff entity. And I think we need to make some improvement there where the shutoff piece is really coming from the DPW. So more on that. Next. And then on the procurement policies in the current financial policies are good. It just needs to be, few minor things need to be updated. As the town's procurement officers, Carly and I will update that and get that into the document. But there was no policy real changes there. It's just some cleanup. Next. A proposed UDAG policy. So we've been talking about having a policy for the UDAG, and this is just a proposed draft. There's nothing currently in the policies about UDAG. In a nutshell, a thought is the town's UDAG funds are under the direct authority of the select board. Though these funds are currently unrestricted, the select board shall only consider authorization of UDAG funds upon recommendation of the town manager and finance manager for use toward one-time economic development or infrastructure needs of the town, which are extraordinary or unforeseen outside of the normal budget processes. Additionally, the select board shall authorize the use of UDAG funds by a simple majority vote and subject to said funds being replenished with free cash by a future town meeting, or perhaps replenished by a future town meeting without identifying free cash. So just sort of, I took a first attempt at that UDAG policy. I think that the three things I've heard from the select board is, one, they really want it to go towards the original intent, even though it's unrestricted, to be economic development or infrastructure. And two, that there's a mechanism that we're replenishing those funds as we move forward. Next. So a proposed policy for reserve fund for future payments of accrued liabilities for compensated balances. In a nutshell, I took with Kevin Johnson, we put this together. If you recall, the town meeting in 2019, and that's what the first bullet says, established this account where we can, for funding of compensated absences owed to employees specifically upon their termination of employment with the town. The second bullet says it's intended for use when an employee terminates employment with the town for retirement or other reasons, when the termination is unforeseen prior to the annual budget process, and when the department budget is not able to support payment of compensated balances. The third bullet, and this is what the policy has been since the fund was established, use of this reserve fund is authorized with a written recommendation from the town finance manager with the approval of the town manager. And then the final bullet, it is recommended that this reserve fund maintain a balance of at least $50,000. Contributions to this reserve fund will be considered during the annual budget process by written request from the town finance manager and subject to approval by town meeting. So at the time when Ms. Gabri and I looked at it after it was formed, we estimated that on average, and we're not in average times, unfortunately, but usually there's about maybe one or two, say, retirements or separations a year. And roughly that's where the $50,000 recommendation came from. So again, something you can review in more detail and open to any suggestions. This is obviously a new item that isn't in the current policies. Next. Other potential policy updates, and this is the last slide, and I appreciate everybody's time, is do we want a section about the financial authority and role of town meeting in the policies? So do we want something specific that talks about town meeting, its financial authority, its role, something to think about? Do we want a section about the budget calendar and process? Both the budget calendar and the budget process that we're using now, which I think are a great leap forward, has happened since the last update of these policies. So they're not mentioned in the policy. And then lastly, and I know Fred and some others have brought this up at some of our meetings, do we want a section about the reserve fund, I should say transfer policy? we do have a reserve fund transfer policy. I know that there have been some concerns that about further defining and further perhaps restricting, for lack of a better word, that. And then lastly, there's some other things for this. So to conclude, Mr. Chair, I wanted to try to at least get this on the paper, as they say. So Carly's going to send this to everybody. I know there's a lot here. There's perhaps more questions than answers, but that way folks can review it. And when I said this ties into number 5, I think that perhaps we should put together a working group that has some dedicated, time to further refine and drive these out in preparation for completion. So I know that was a lot. I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. So for a working group, we would have to have a number that is not quorum for the by board. It would also have to stay away from a final decision. So it'd be a working group to just take the feedback. Are you going to distribute the presentation that you just did so that everyone can provide their feedback along in that in writing? Okay, I think a working group is a fantastic idea. Definitely would help collect what the questions you posed with the changes that everyone else has proposed and put that into a final draft for review.
Okay. If I may, so we'll send that to everybody now, review it. We're open to any suggestions. Like I said, there's more just to further frame our thoughts. Also, perhaps if there's something that's an individual is particularly interested or passionate about or has experience with, that we can also accomplish more by dividing up if you want to take on some of the things. But maybe let's start with that review, and then to your point, Mr. Chair, we could put together a working group. We just have to make sure there isn't a quorum and that it has no decision-making authority. It's just to sort of get this work done to be brought back here.
Okay. So I guess the question on the working group makeup, would it be better to have, so sorry, how many do we have on the by board for what's our quorum number? Is it 5?
So the quorum number is based actually on 7. So there's 5 of us now. And then there are 2, the chair and vice chair of the FinCom. So it'd be 4.
Have they been technically, have they participated yet?
Informally.
Okay.
Kurt did informally at one of them.
Do we know who the vice chair is? No, because they haven't met.
Right, which is
Okay.
on this agenda for, I have a thought on that that's later on the agenda. So
Well,
I would-
why don't we, sorry, go ahead.
oh, it's just, I'm sorry, I would argue the following, and I know they're, so everybody of the 5, all of them are employees except you, Mr. Hood, meaning you're an elected official. So if we were to meet, quote, in the town manager's office under those auspices, it would not activate an open meeting law violation.
Correct. Yeah,
So
that
this-
was my thought also, because I think trying to schedule where, for myself, I mean, and other individuals from the finance committee where we're working full time, it would
Right.
probably end up pushing us back a little further than if the employees, full-time employees on the by board were to take the initial pass.
Right, and again, I just want to stress again that it's just to get this work, if you will, done, then come back to this group, which would make the recommendations. And as we all know, the policies actually have to be approved by the select board and the finance committee. So what I'm getting at is, there's just a working group. Has no authority.
Yep. I think that's our best approach. I'll feedback from anyone else. Carly?
No, sorry, my hand was just like that, but I did just email the presentation, just FYI. To everyone here.
All right, thank you.
So why don't we, folks will get this riveting presentation from me, take a couple days to review it, thoughts, and then I'll reach back out to folks to talk about how we want to, meet or, set up the next stage for the working group.
Okay,
That's good.
With the goal of having the working group, meet hopefully before the October buy board meeting. So then at the October buy board meeting, I think we'd have a pretty good draft.
all right, sounds like a plan. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
All right, before we move on from items 4 and 5, anything else on the policies before we move on? No? All right, thank you. Number 6, discussion review of proposed FY 2024 budget process and schedule.
I sort of, Mr. Chair, I
Already
sort of
covered
touched upon it in the beginning. I think everybody has the draft schedule. If you could take a look at that, if you have any suggestions, edits and so forth, get that to Carly and I. As I mentioned, this is going to be on the agenda under my report on September 20th for the select board, just for their discussion and questions. And again, we're looking to get this in place and approval for October 4th.
Okay. Thank you. On item number 7, new business, proposed joint meeting with FinCom for overview of the town finances, town financial policies, and the budget process.
So, Mr. Chair, I sort of took the liberty to put this on under new business. First, I'd like to thank the town moderator who has worked very diligently since his election to get the finance committee reconstituted, if you will. And it's exciting that we have the committee members in place. And it's sort of, we're in a unique time in the sense that the committee is relatively all brand new and is sort of reconstituted. And I know we've talked about this, that perhaps it would be a nice idea to have a joint meeting, a future joint meeting with the buy board and the FinCom to introduce everybody and then just give an overview of the town's finances, the town financial policies and the budget process, and sort of kick that off. And I would envision the buy board, the moderator and the members. I mean, I think ideally it would, if we did it in person, which is always nice for a first meeting, it would probably have to be in the evening that worked with folks' work schedules. Or, I mean, it could also be something considered for Zoom, but I just think where this is a unique time, I think it would be great. And we'll all be working together to get off right on the right foot. There's a lot of institutional knowledge here on the buy board. And we have some great new energy on the FinCom and put that together.
All right. So how many members of the finance committee do we have? I know we lost Lou, so we're at 4 right now.
We have, let's see.
I think she's pulling it out.
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry.
Mr.
Yeah,
Chair, if I may,
Yes, Mr. Tillotson.
I'm speaking as a moderator, not as a member of the Finance Committee. We currently have 4 members and I'm still looking for more.
Okay, excellent.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Carly, do you have their names?
I do. It's Jin Hong, Sebastian Cordova, Andrew Seeley, and Kurt Frachowski.
Have they scheduled their first meeting yet?
No.
No, okay. No. All right, we'll wait for them to, I guess, meet and get organized, and then we can schedule a joint meeting.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, what I was going to maybe suggest is, and I have always been, especially since the change by town meeting, I am fully sensitive to the fact that the Finance Committee is a committee of town meeting and is independent. what I was thinking, perhaps the moderator, myself, and Mr. Aponte, I could reach out, maybe if they put their first meeting together, at least appear before that first meeting just as an introduction, and then present the idea of this, future joint meeting.
That sounds like a good idea.
And then if folks from this group would be thinking about, and to avoid sort of information overload, but if each of you have very unique and professional experiences in various aspects of the town's finances and budget process, be thinking about, your brief, presentation based on your experience for their benefit.
Okay. Yeah, I think whatever we can give them to get started, information wise, is definitely helpful. I remember when I first started, I came on at the time, there were 4 new members, and the senior person, Mr. Muldoon, had, I think I made less than a year on the committee, and we were figuring things out as we went. So if we can pre-fill that information just on, where to find information and what their, let them decide what their scope and what their process is going to be, that would be definitely beneficial.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Robert. Next item on the agenda is scheduling of our next meeting. So we've generally been doing the second Tuesdays.
Yep. So it would be Tuesday, October 11th at 2.
That works for me if it works for everyone else.
Yep.
For me,
Thank-
All right, thank you. And actually, I forgot to do this on your list. I'll open up to any other questions or comments before we adjourn. No?
Good.
Okay. I'll take a motion to adjourn then.
So moved.
second,
All right, roll call vote. Ms. Antonellis,
Aye.
Mr. Aponte,
aye.
Ms. Tierney,
Aye.
Mr. Popriand,
Aye.
and the chair says we are adjourned. Thanks very much for all the hard work that went into today's presentation, discussion, and thanks for your time.